Dear old work platform, it's not you, it's us. Actually, it is you. Endless onboarding? Constant IT bottlenecks? We've had enough. We need a platform that just gets us. And to be honest, we've met someone new. They're called Monday.com, and it was love at first onboarding. Their beautiful dashboards, their customizable workflows got us floating on a digital cloud 9. So no hard feelings, but we're moving on. Monday.com, the first work platform you'll love to use.
It's true that some things change as we get older. But if you're a woman over 40 and you're dealing with insomnia, brain fog, moodiness, and weight gain, you don't have to accept it as just another part of aging. And with MIDI Health, you can get help and stop pushing through it alone. The experts at MIDI understand that all these symptoms can be connected to the hormonal changes that happen around menopause. And MIDI can help you feel more like yourself again. Many healthcare providers aren't trained to treat or even recognize menopause symptoms. MIDI clinicians are menopause experts. They're dedicated to providing safe, effective, FDA-approved solutions for dozens of hormonal symptoms, not just hot flashes. Most importantly, they're covered by insurance. 91% of MIDI patients get relief from symptoms within just 2 months. You deserve to feel great. Book your virtual visit today at joinmidi.com. That's joinmidi.com.
So we're recording. Okay, everybody, we're back with Ken and Mike with My Uncle's Escaped Alcatraz, and today we're going to be discussing more Mickey Cohen stuff. We're actually tracking down an author of a bunch of books about Mickey Cohen to see if we can what he knows about it. He's written like 4 or 5 books about Mickey Cohen and his relation to the mob and Hollywood and Los Angeles and the United States and all that kind of stuff. And so we're going to talk a little bit. Ken, recently, I mean, you've gotten a lot. Some of the. Tell us what you found as far as more FBI files regarding Mickey Cohen.
Well, I was able to run across a company who actually was selling the complete FBI files on Mickey Cohen. If you go out to the FBI vault, they don't, I was assuming they would have it out there and you could just get it for free. But for some reason, they had it on his wife, but they didn't have himself. So I was able to track down, it was actually a newspaper, online newspaper company that had the complete file, and I purchased it and downloaded it. I'm going through it now, but it's pretty fascinating that the FBI was surveilling and following and recording what Mickey Cohen was doing for, all the way back into the 40s. So it's, it wasn't something that just like happened in 1960 something or 58, and they were going to, put him away for it. They were actually building a case against him for quite a while.
That's interesting. Yeah, I mean, because some of the books that I've been kind of perusing about it, I mean, he was a major figure in Los Angeles and had they say he was connected to that he was connected to the Brat Pack and that kind of stuff. So I mean, obviously he had he was connected to Vegas and that whole West Coast mob syndicate. So yeah, I mean, you would think when you have someone that you're surveilling for like close to 20 years,
mm-hmm.
I mean, I would imagine there's a lot there. I would imagine there was a lot of give and take with those surveillances. I mean, like I said, a lot of times the government would use organized crime to kind of manipulate stuff that they're doing, which
right.
is kind of the illusion that was kind of they alluded to when they're talking about the JFK assassination article I was just talking about before we came and recorded. There was a guy that just came on who literally who said he was connected to the mob and says he was the one who literally today just came out says I killed JFK and he said Trump's vowed declassified CIA files will bring nothing but lies, and he basically said he was part of the team that was involved with the Bay of Pigs, and he actually crossed the line between the mob and the government.
Right.
Whether or not, what they say his name is, here's Charles Chucky Nicoletti. And so part of the, I guess I'm not sure what part of it was the Chicago mob but yeah, there's all these things. I'm telling you about that time period. There's all this coalescing of both government and organized crime and the CIA. So it's kind of like when you start unearthing things like they're doing right now, what Trump is doing right now. Well, there's a lot of tentacles. It's like an octopus. And so I think that's the same thing with this. I don't think there's like one. I don't think someone can say, I know the real story, because there's so many stories that have been created and you don't know who was told what. It's how like they tell you they just tell you the part you need to know, and that's all you need, and that's all you know. And so everybody has their own story, but it's kind of like the way they kind of create disinformation. They just kind of sprinkle all this information around. And that's why I think the JFK assassination is so confusing and so convoluted. I think a lot of the times with Alcatraz, it is way less convoluted than the JFK assassination. Like we have, there's not as many people involved. And as we heard from the recording last week, when we, of the correctional officer, the guard, where he basically said that the smoking gun there was that, he found the raft, him and Olaf, they brought it back. It was hung up there. And there's no mention of any of that in the FBI files.
Not that we've been able to see.
So the fact that with Mickey Cohen involved and the, Supreme Court Justice, Warren involved, I mean, it's so hard to track like what's really going on, but it all stems. I really think the center of all this is Mickey Cohen. I mean, it's like, without Mickey Cohen, you really don't, I don't think those guys escape without Mickey Cohen. And if they did escape, it would have been like another failed attempt. Like, they were in the baker's room in the boxes and they were caught,
Right.
So I don't think they would have gotten out. I don't think
Right.
or if they did, they would have been caught and stuff like that. So he really is the center of this wheel.
I agree. I ran across one. I haven't read all of the FBI files yet. I've been going through them kind of slow on him, but I did run across one that I do plan to file with the Freedom of Information Act to see whether or not I can get the rest of it unredacted. But it was in the 1956, 57 timeframe. I believe that was right. Could have been 58. But they were recording the person, whoever it is redacted, flew a plane of Mickey's down into Mexico, was down there for they said, they never said where he went, but it could have been redacted. But stayed down there for several months and then flew the plane back into Los Angeles to wherever Mickey's was, came at the scene. And that's just interesting because this kind of follows what Mike and I had discovered and wrote in the book was the very first time the Anglin brothers, along with Fred, went out to Mickey's, to Los Angeles. They went into Mexico. They flew into Mexico. So it would be really fascinating to see who is behind those redacted lines. So I plan to file. Sometimes it takes several months to get an answer back, whether or not they'll let you have it or not. But it would be very interesting to see what is there.
Yeah. Yeah. What do you think, Mike?
Well, it sort of reminds me about if you've ever heard of Project Blue Book, that was formed by the government, started in 1947. I think it ended in 69. And that was in the 1950s. There was a big UFO craze that people were seeing things in the sky and, alien encounters and so forth. And so there were so many reports about it that the government formally investigated it with Project Blue Book. And we find out later that it may have started off as, are these sightings a threat to national security? That's why the government was getting involved. Are there really ships that can fly in ways that could, if they attack, can we defend ourselves, kind of a thing. But one of the things that happened later on with this agency is that the government was developing new planes, new technologies, missiles, and so forth, and they had their places where they were doing these kinds of secret testing. One of them, probably the most famous, is Area 51 in Nevada. And there are others, of course, across the country. And so the government was actually using Project Blue Book as a cover for these, development of our technology during the Cold War against the Russians. So they let the American public sort of have this feeding frenzy of UFO sightings, and these sometimes they'd be filmed, sometimes it would just be observed. And so there was the public like, hey, we're looking for UFOs, see if they're real, but it was really covering the testing. And if they could sort of mask what they were really doing, then nobody could identify what was really happening. And it sounds similar to me, like with JFK and possibly the FBI files and not releasing the records of the unredacted files, was, you have the public information about the assassination in Oswald and then possible ties to the Anglins. And then there's what we suspect is what was really happening, kind of behind the scenes kind of thing that is hard to identify because of what the public story is.
Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, I literally just finished a documentary about that, what you just talked about the Project Blue Book, and it was it's coming out hopefully soon, but it literally focuses on that era where and a little later than that, where they continued it on, and they basically there was a scientist, or I forget, it was an electrical engineer that lived near one of the bases out there in the Southwest, and he started seeing lights, and he started recording energy stuff, and so he created this device that can record energy and stuff like that, and he was getting all these spikes, and he was seeing the lights, and so he went to the military base and told them what he was seeing, and they were doing exactly what you said. They were new technology that they're experimenting with and like that, but they didn't want anybody to know. So they said, listen, they go, hey, thanks for coming to us with this information. Thank you. We're going to give you some technology so you can measure it yourself. And they kind of looped him in, or read him in, or he thought he was being read in. But what he really was being is he was being the patsy, the information patsy. So he would say, whatever you find, you bring right back to us. And so they did this for years for this poor man, and eventually drove him crazy, because he kept on, and because he thought what he was seeing was real, and they were just manipulating him. They had the U.S. Air Force intelligence wing, a guy named Richard Doty, who was basically the one who was feeding information, telling him, yeah, this is what's really happening. He had them really convinced that, UFOs were happening, and that all this stuff that he was seeing and he was measuring, and really kind of did a number on him. Also got a journalist involved and started leaking information to him, and then another scientist. And then they started this whole commission. They literally took it to the nth degree, and this went on for years. And then they finally figured out that it was all a sham. And it was like the UFO community just kind of went crazy because of how you lied to. They were still believing it, even though they told them it was a lie. And that's with the FBI, that's what they did with this too, or the government. We don't know if it was the FBI or was another agency with outside of the FBI that was controlling this. We don't really know. I mean, because there's as we're finding out with all this information dump that's happening now and going through, and they're auditing the government and stuff like that. There's money that's used for things that we have no clue of. All these kind of blacklist things that we have no idea, that's propagating, misinformation, and then how they're using that to manipulate other countries, elections and stuff. So I wouldn't put it past. With this, they're creating more misinformation. That's why, when we look, Art right in the eye, and says, after he discusses with us all these possibilities, and then he goes, well, I think they died in the water. And that's like,
it's so ridiculous.
They never made it out alive. And you can tell, looking at him when he says that, that's not what he believes.
Right.
No.
He's just, it's part of the the standard statement that everybody gives, because number one is that he either knows or he doesn't know, and he's been told not to say anything about it.
There's only a few events in our history that has been shrouded in mystery. Of course, the Earhart mystery, the Alcatraz mystery, and then the JFK mystery. Well, why is it that the Alcatraz is such a mystery? It's beyond me. I mean, we're talking about a prison break of 3 convicts. We're not talking about someone that is related or, that went out and killed a president or, then escaped or something. These are 3 bank robbery convicts. And somehow you just cannot help believe that it's connected. And that's the reason why they don't want it released. The same reason they didn't release the JFK files,
right,
is because there's something in there that they don't want the public to see.
Yeah.
And that's
it's
the same
the only
way
thing
with the Alcatraz files.
It's the only thing that makes sense, though, if you think about it logically. I mean, Mickey Cohen was in there at the same time as them. They were, growing marijuana for him, and then they couldn't because of Kennedy. And then, all of it's kind of connected, and it makes logical sense that Mickey Cohen would have helped them escape, because he was going to be, he wanted his drug operation to happen no matter what, right?
Right. I mean, what kind of secrets, national secrets could be in the FBI files around Alcatraz that they're afraid that somehow it's going to be released? Or, is there in any way anything in those files going to jeopardize their investigation, the U.S. Marshals, who has the case, or the FBI, in finding the 3 men, or the conclusion? They've already made up their mind that they drowned, right? I mean, if you ask any U.S. Marshal, or if you ask any FBI agent, they will come back and say, oh, yeah, they drowned. Well, if that's the case, then why do you still have the case open? Why are you redacting so much information out of these files? If you really believe that they never made it to shore, they drowned, what is the harm then in letting us see everything? Why are you keeping evidence still to this day that belongs to the family?
Yeah. Well, I mean, if you didn't have this new declassification that's happening right now with the files and all the other stuff that's being unearthed, I mean, I think we're at a pivotal point in history where it's almost like we're purging. It's like the nation wants to purge all this information and secrets and stuff like that. And, and that's why, because they've been working the way they've been working for so long. They're afraid of change. And it's like, it's like a family's dark history. Like they had a relative who was like a murderer that no one wants to talk about, or like that years ago, but no one wants to bring it up because it's going to disturb, the symmetrical nature of what's going on right now. And they don't want anybody else to know. So it's like business as usual, and they just want, and now, whether it's fortunate or unfortunate that Trump is turning over the apple cart and really releasing all this stuff, it's driving, all these agencies who have been used to not showing anybody anything for so long and keeping it and just kicking the can down the road, that, now they can't do it anymore. They're going to be forced to come to terms with all this information that we've been hiding for so many years. And I just don't understand, like you said before, unless there was some more nefarious reasons about the Alcatraz escape, which obviously there is, because why would they be covering it up so much? And whether it's,
But that's it's so interesting too, because it's like, okay, other people have escaped from Alcatraz. Why these guys? Like, why are these guys so mysterious? Why is there so many secrets surrounding this? Like, why can't they just give you all the information? You're a relative. Why can't they just give you the unredacted files?
There have been escapes from other prisons, many before Alcatraz. and many after Alcatraz. But this is the only one that I know of, unless other people know, where they have wanted to keep it a secret for some reason. Most of the information they don't want to share. The Alcatraz escape occurs in June of 62. JFK is killed in November of 63, just a little over a year between the events. You've got someone that is Mickey Cohen, who is in the center of the Alcatraz story and is also somehow in the center of the JFK story. His friends are part of that JFK story. And then he's now, in the
not only his friends, but also
story.
people in the government. Like you have the
Yes.
Supreme Court justice. So it's like it's both sides. It's both the illegal and legal sides. You have them on both sides.
Right. So, like you said, I'm just using common sense. You look at this and one cannot help but go, okay, something's got to be related between the two. Because why such a secret on an escape from 3 convicts out of a federal penitentiary? That is, I've never heard of that before in my life.
Yeah.
Well, and one of the things that we discussed last week with Clifford Fish and Olaf Carpenter was, the detail that he goes into about how they found the raft and then how they tied it to their boat and brought it back, and everyone's looking at it, everyone's examining it. It's well known. Whitey Bulger talked about how it was well known amongst the population of the prison inmates, how they all knew that the boat was found. We talked to, or at least I talked to, Charles Herman, one of the guards who was there the night of the escape. He told me that, yes, he confirmed that the raft was brought back to Alcatraz. We have the APB report, of course, that says that the raft was found on Angel Island. And yet, not only does the FBI report say very little about the raft, practically nothing, but it goes out of its way to say that they sent the military police on Angel Island and were there for a day and a night, examining, searching everywhere, and they said they found no evidence of any connection to the escape on Angel Island. They go out of their way to say there was nothing there, and yet we have many sources that say that it was there. So why are they intentionally erasing that part of the story? Because if the raft is found intact and it's seaworthy, then that blows a hole in the water of they fell in the water and drowned. That all somehow 3 of them fell in the water and then they'd all drown on a calm night when the water was calm, was placid. How do you drown?
2 guys that could swim the Tampa Bay. Those guys. Right. That doesn't make any sense.
Right. So they're trying to create this narrative in the FBI report to go out of their way to say that this did not happen when so many other pieces of evidence say it did happen. And why are they trying to do that? Because they're trying to say they drowned. Well, if they want them dead, why do they want them dead?
Right.
At least
exactly. Yeah, and if you look at one of the things that caught my eyes when I read the FBI files on Alcatraz was the sheer volume of investigation that they did that the public came forward with. Like I said, there are many, accounts where an individual calls in and says, hey, I think I saw them in a car, or like I said one time that someone reported, there's a guy at a that's working a bellhop in a hotel in New York, and he looks just like John Anglin. They went and investigated that, and they wrote a document on it. And every hundreds of leads that people all up and down the East Coast in the northern part of the country, anywhere someone said they might have seen them, but yet they turn around and take someone like Cliff Fish or the San Francisco police officer Chechi, and they dismiss them altogether. They don't even take the opportunity to write an FBI report on it.
It's really interesting because another case we were working on this past year, they did the same exact thing. They had one witness who was there. Police did the same exact thing. Law enforcement did the same exact thing. They had one witness who was there who challenged the timeline that they created, and they did everything they could to dismiss this person. The law enforcement did the exact same thing. There were about 10 witnesses who were at this place where this victim was killed. And they took all the phones from the 10 witnesses who were in line with the narrative that they wanted to push. And the one witness who challenged the timeline and had evidence to challenge the timeline, they dismissed him.
They started gaslighting.
They started gaslighting him. They didn't take his phone. They told everyone that he was a liar. And they just kept focusing on these people over here who were in line with what they wanted the public to know about this case. Right. And it was a lot of corruption involved, local, state officials, a lot of corruption. Same thing. It's like, and it reminds me of this because it's, why are you pushing a narrative that they drowned when you have evidence to show that they most likely did not drown?
Right.
It's the same thing. It's like, they want to push the narrative that they want to push, and they're going to do whatever they can to push that narrative to keep a lid on what they don't want you to know.
And then if that's the case, if they did drown, why is there a ton of files of them investigating them down in Brazil? And why did they surveil your family for like what? I don't know, 20 years?
For a lot. Actually, yeah, for maybe even longer than that. Who knows that they're still listening? But
right.
But it's so crazy because Officer Chechi, undoubtedly, it wasn't just that they came to him and said, "Hey, we don't believe you. You undoubtedly didn't see what you saw." They were making it public because Officer Chechi said that it got so bad in his office or his department, whatever it was, that he would open his locker. He opened his locker one time, and some of his colleagues had put a picture of a boat inside of his locker with a note saying, "Is this the boat that you saw?" Making fun of him. So a lot of people in his group, his coworkers, knew about it. So it wasn't like this private thing. Undoubtedly, it was public knowledge that they were trying to make fun of him, trying to dismiss what he saw. So they were publicly trying to discredit him. And you go into, just like you said, here's the man who saw something the night that it was happening. The next day, he's telling them, "Guys, I saw something that you might want to go look at." It's like Mike said, they could have gone to these, local marinas, and they might have discovered something early on. But because they decided to cover it up and, discredit him, he was forced to go to the newspaper because he wanted the story to be told.
Well, in relation to that, I mean, other people may have come out to the law enforcement authorities that they just squashed.
You're exactly right. We might not know about some of them.
Because he went to the papers.
Right. How many other people? I mean, that's a pretty big area, right? I mean, I live there. I know, like, people would be standing outside. You can see stuff in the bay all night long.
Everybody's looking at the bay.
Everyone's
all day
looking,
long.
right? So I'm sure there were other people who might have seen something who either were afraid to say anything or did say something, and no one knows about it.
Yeah.
I mean, luckily this police officer was smart enough to go to the newspaper.
I mean, there's not a place. I mean, you almost have a 360 around Alcatraz. You do have a 360 around, and the city surrounded, other than the part where the Golden Gate Bridge is, but where then you'd have people going over the bridge, so you could have people seeing that. There's not a place in that bay where you can't see from anywhere. I lived in Sausalito, and I could open my window. There. I could see everything that we're talking about, which I can see from the Golden Gate Bridge, all the way to Alcatraz, Angel Island, all the way to the Bay Bridge, all the way to Tiburon. I mean, it's like I had like a more than a 180 view of the bay. And if there's boats in the bay, especially at night, you actually be able to see them more, because if they had lights on or anything like that, you're more apt to see it. So I'm sure there are other people that saw that boat.
Well, if it had not been for him going to the newspaper, like you said, Cindy, we never would have known the story. Because unless somebody, he had come up later on and told someone, but it was the article in the newspaper that, people saw years later and went, "Wait a minute," especially after we saw the boat, or after we read in the FBI files that Mickey Cohen supplied a boat. oh my gosh, now this matches up to something somebody had said in a newspaper article, just a couple of days afterwards. And so that's what got people looking at Officer Chechi. But I agree with you. How many other people saw something and they might have reported it, to the FBI, and they just missed it, or maybe they did record it. One of the other things too was the timing of the prison vote. They left. I don't have it up with me right now, but it's like 11:30, 11 something.
11:15.
11:15. So they don't stay on in the mainland that long. It's pretty much it's a turnaround and they're back to the island. So it's very possible by the time the three men got to the boat, in the middle of the bay to pick them up, that the prison boat was on its way back up. They could have seen it, and whether or not they ever, went to the, later on the next day and say, hey, I think we saw a boat, well, we know now the FBI is covering stuff up, right? Because they didn't even put in what Cliff Fish did. So do you think two prison boat or a prison boat driver who might have seen a boat that night and said something the next day, they just probably dismissed it. They had a narrative they wanted to push, which was the men drowned.
Right.
And
that's the same thing.
Anything that went against that, they quashed it.
Same thing. 2 cases that we worked on. They said those kids were runaways. That's it. They went to the media. The law enforcement went to the media, said they're runaways. That's it. They didn't disappear. They didn't vanish. They didn't get killed. They're runaways. And they were not runaways. we have evidence and proof. They did not run away. Right. But I think that happens a lot, even on a small level, much less a federal level, where you have this prison that was supposed to be like a fortress. Like no one could escape this prison. This was like Alcatraz, the Rock, this big iconic, prison of the most secure prison in history, and people are escaping from it. Right. But like you said, like we said before, why these 3? The other people escape from Alcatraz, and nobody even knows that.
I think because we were saying, why is this holding people's interest? One of the things that I've done, just kind of on a, has how it's seeped into our popular culture, kind of an examination. And I went on Amazon and I stopped counting at 100 the books that were written about Alcatraz. That's when I stopped counting, 100. There's been songs. There was a TV show about 10 years ago about Alcatraz. It wasn't based on the escape, but it was sort of this paranormal kind of a story, but it was set on Alcatraz where these interesting things were happening. What is it about the story? Clint Eastwood did the movie about it. There's been actually a number of other movies about Alcatraz, Birdman of Alcatraz, The Rock, which, it's not about it is about the escape, but it's a fictitious escape with Sean Connery. But many, many other movies and TV shows are referencing Alcatraz. What is it about this story that has captured people's imaginations? And I think it is on par with the JFK, where you have the government's official position of this is what we concluded happened, and then you have all these other people who are connected to it either directly or indirectly to the story that are saying something different. And so then people are wondering, okay, which is the truth? You have truth A and you have truth B. Which one do I follow? The one that I'm tending to lean toward is truth B, which is really what happened, or most likely what happened. And then you have truth A, that's the government narrative. But there's something about the government narrative that's not quite lining up. That's like, I'm not sure I believe that, or I'm seeing holes or inconsistencies, but they keep saying it's the truth. When what these other people are saying seems to be more in line with what we think really happened. And when you have these two competing ideas about the truth, people want to get to the bottom of it, because there's something. It's like the phrase, it doesn't pass the smell test, and that's what these two stories. You have the official story, and it's like it doesn't pass the smell test. There's something, I don't know what it is, but I can't believe it, or there's something preventing me from fully embracing this idea of what I'm being told, or what I said, tell me what I should believe. And so when you have people who come along and say, I have an alternative idea and here's my evidence and my proof, people tend to lean toward it and say, yes, that makes sense. That's reasonable. That's why I think the Alcatraz story still captivates and it's still a part of our popular culture. And, they even have the Escape from Alcatraz race that's inspired by the Escape, the triathlon that Ken has participated in. So that's why I think it still holds people's attention. And just, we're still asked, Ken and I, to speak at places about the story. I did one a speaking engagement earlier this week. They said, "Hey, we would love to hear your story and what really happened." And Ken goes to speaking engagements. We get approached by producers who want to adapt the book. They said, "Hey, we love the story. We want to adapt it." We're still getting talked to about stuff like that. So it's clearly a story that won't die.
Well, it's a fantastic story. And as far as passing the smell test, I mean, it smells like low tide, what they're trying to perpetuate. It's bad. I mean, because when you sit there and like I said, we had Art on the show and, and
and the skip tracer, the guy that went to Brazil
there, and they have, I mean, the skip tracer has nothing, he's got nothing in the game here. He's not, he's just telling his experience and what happened. Whether or not he was holding back certain information, I felt like he probably was holding back a little bit. But at the same point, when you ask these direct questions and you then you get these kind of
Dear old work platform, it's not you, it's us. Actually, it is you. Endless onboarding? Constant IT bottlenecks? We've had enough. We need a platform that just gets us. And to be honest, we've met someone new. They're called Monday.com, and it was love at first onboarding. Their beautiful dashboards, their customizable workflows got us floating on a digital cloud 9. So no hard feelings, but we're moving on. Monday.com, the first work platform you'll love to use.
Either a direct answer, which doesn't make sense, or this kind of convoluted answer, which kind of just makes it more, you want to know more then. And you're like, well, why? It doesn't make sense. It's like they're trying to explain something that's been covered up. It's like all these things that are happening now. It's like everything. It's like, I think this is like the perfect time for this story to really kind of come out. It's like, it's like a harmonic convergence of information dump that's happening right now, with the JFK files, and they're dumping other files too, and they're going through other things, and we're finding out all this other stuff that's coming that, the government has been, whitewashing and kind of keeping from the public. And now there's such a visceral appetite because we've been kind of told this is what happened. And we want to know more, and we want to know what really happened. I can't imagine that. I don't think we're going to have a better time than to really kind of blow this out of the water right now. It's like the perfect time.
Well, when FDR, Franklin Roosevelt, became president in 1932, what the public didn't know was that he had polio and he could barely walk. He had to have braces. And so whenever he was filmed or taken photographs of, there was an agreement, sort of a gentleman's agreement between the media and Roosevelt, that they wouldn't show him unable to walk because that would convey weakness. And, this is during the Depression and then just on the eve of World War II. And so you needed a president because he had a very strong personality. He was a very charismatic guy. He just had this, he contracted polio. And so that was his unfortunate, reality. So they always showed him either standing, behind a podium or seated in a car. They never showed him walking. And they kept the secret until after he had died that he couldn't walk, because they were the gatekeepers of information. Everything was channeled through the media, either through film or photographs or newspaper stories, or presidents or high-ranking government officials with their infidelities. Again, the secrets were kept. The media didn't report those things because they were the source of the information. Well, now that doesn't exist anymore. Everybody's got phones, everyone's got cameras, the media is all over the place. Now they're looking to expose secrets. And the government just can't hold the tide back anymore of stonewalling everyone, of again, the gentleman's agreement that we won't report on certain things. Now that's gone.
Well, we've discovered it's not only a gentleman's agreement now, that these information dump that we're getting recently, some of these news organizations were getting paid by the government for this stuff too. So we're trying to, so it really, it's kind of evolved into a different way, because, you can't say that, the horse is black when it's clearly white. And then, well, no, it's black. They just keep on perpetuating information. They just kind of hit you over the head with it. So it's a different, to me, it's like misinformation is at an all-time high, because now the public can perpetuate it as well online and everything. Because
yeah, this other case we're working on, the social media is insane. I mean, people are there's millions of people commenting on this case and perpetuating false information. I mean, it's insane, and they just keep going and going and hanging on to that theory, just kind of like with Alcatraz, hanging on to this theory that this is the narrative we're going to sell and you're going to buy it. And other people are like, no, that's not true. So there's like a social media war happening also with information at the moment with different things. People want the truth. They don't want to be lied to.
I mean, I'll read an article like, I just got the article about the guy who said he killed Jeffrey. You can't go by just that one article. You gotta do your research.
Yeah.
Now
You can't
find
trust
out
journalists. I mean, I'm a journalist, okay? Trained journalist, worked in news bureaus all over the world.
Tell your experience in France.
And when I lived in France, I worked at France 24. And, there were things that we were allowed to report on, and there were things that we weren't. I mean, you didn't have the freedom to just say, well, I'm going to report on this story because I think it's interesting. You just didn't have that freedom. It was, no, you're going to do this and this and this, and that's it. Especially
when it comes to the government.
I mean, that was a government-owned news station, but I've worked in the United States also at news stations. I mean, and today it's different. Like, I would not do journalism today. It's not what I grew up learning, where you have to have sources. People don't have sources. They just write whatever they want. I mean, when you do research on some of these articles, it's like, where did you get this information from? AI? It's the spelling's wrong. Like, there's no sources anymore. There's no journalistic integrity where you need 3 sources, which is what we were trained
it's like,
to have.
It's because it's biased on either side. I remember when I first started out in the business, I worked at PBS in New York, and I worked over right in the same studio as McNeil Lehrer, which was like, for people, it's 100 years ago, but that was like literally the only unbiased news report. Cause you had, both of these journalists would never vote, because they said if they voted, then there would be bias. So they never voted in any elections. So, you don't have that today, and that was obviously was funded by the government, but at the same point, they felt the responsibility that they had to be completely unbiased. And then, unfortunately, then that has gone by the way of the dodo. And we have these, news organizations now that are just, they have a very strict bias on one side or the other. And so you're never going to get the real you'll get a tainted version of it. And I think, what we're talking about here is that depending upon, because it happened so long ago, it's gone through so many news cycles and so many things it would be buried to this day if it wasn't for you guys right now. I mean, if you guys didn't written this book and done the other documentaries and
all your investigations, keeping it alive.
Because no one else. I mean, there might be other people, but that might, like you said, there's 100 books, but no one has the access and the receipts that you guys have had. I mean, your family lived it.
Well, that's the thing I wanted to ask you, Ken. Like, talking about pop culture and how Alcatraz has, enthralled people over the decades. How did your family feel about all of that? A movie, like all the pop culture things that happened about Alcatraz, like TV shows, movies. Like, did they ever talk about that stuff?
Like when the Clint Eastwood
they
movie
did. Oh, yes, they did.
I was going to say, like, what was their? It's interesting to me, like, what was their thoughts about all of this surge in pop culture about their brothers and escaping this prison?
I remember Uncle Man one time at one of the family cookouts reunion we had. I remember it wasn't too long after the movie had come out, and I remember he was livid. I mean, he was really mad because he was like, they made a movie about my 2 brothers, and not one time did they ever bother to pick up the phone or come to my house and ask me anything about my brothers. They just took the narrative that, this is who John and Clarence was. And, he would say many times, he said, everybody has made millions of dollars off of my brothers and what they did. And the family hasn't earned a penny. So he was, even with the skip tracer, he said the same thing to him years and years later. Everyone has taken advantage of the story and what his brothers did. And they just felt like that the family was investigated to the nth degree, pushed aside, and pretty much, left out in the dark. And, they still continue to follow them and listen in on to their conversations and polygraph, Uncle Man multiple times. But, no one ever took the time from Hollywood to ever reach out and ask us anything about their brothers, my uncles. So.
And that's the thing too. It's like, okay, so when the movie came out and all this stuff came out on TV and everything else, your family was still being surveillanced by the government, which,
yes, they were.
and meanwhile, they're pushing the narrative
That's what I was saying earlier,
that these guys drowned. I mean, it makes absolutely
and
no
then we
sense.
have the reports of the files saying that they're looking for them in South America.
Why? What do you? Yeah, this is the thing that's so crazy.
And at the time, the FBI files were not had not been released, probably not even completed yet to the public.
But they existed.
They existed, but we didn't have them. So the story that was being released in the movie, that Frank Morris was the brains behind this, John and Clarence were just a couple of dumb hicks that got invited by him. I mean, that's all we had to go on. I knew that Uncle Man later on knew the truth, but he couldn't come out and say, "Oh no, that's not how it happened." And besides, who was going to believe him anyway?
Right.
Mm-hmm.
The FBI wanted to know, but so it was really strange. It's kind of like growing up. I had a lot of friends in high school that knew about the story. Very few knew that I was related to it because I just didn't share it. It was, like I said, something, when you're in high school and as teen years, you just want to get through school unnoticed.
Right.
You don't want something hanging over your head. So I didn't share the story too much.
As well as the rest of your family members as well. They probably,
Right.
I mean, I would think there was a certain amount of, I don't know if you can tell me if there's, but a little bit of a shame involved there.
I would probably think so at first. They didn't share anything and didn't even want to know anything because of the threats that came from the law enforcement, the FBI. We're going to throw you in prison if you know anything. And, the Anglin family were so poor. I mean, they would even, there's no way they could have fought, hired someone to defend them in a court of law if they were, going to be thrown into prison. They were fearful. And so they pretty much kept their mouth shut. They didn't say anything. And they just flew under the radar as much as possible. But I would probably say, I was kind of shocked when I went out to Alcatraz in 2012 with my mom to do the 50th anniversary and her sister, my aunt. And that was the first time I saw the Alcatraz race. I had gone for a run that morning. My goal, I was a really long distance runner at that time, and I was going to run across the Golden Gate and back and try to get back in time to go do breakfast, with my family. And I just happened, it was a Sunday morning. I happened to go by the Marina Green area, and I was like, what is all the commotion? Because it was early in the morning and I couldn't see that great. I saw all these people getting on buses, and I, made my way across the Golden Gate, came back. And it was daylight then, so I could see it. And I was like, oh my God, there is a race, that is around the Alcatraz escape.
Mm-hmm.
And I just remember at that time, I said, I'm going to do this race. I'm going to come back and do this race at some point in time in my life. And 2016, gave me the opportunity to do it.
Which is, I think, is awesome. But yeah, I mean, when I moved up there to go to Dominican University in San Rafael, Alcatraz was scary. It was like this scary thing that you take this, like, you go on this tour of Alcatraz. It's haunted. It's scary. It's like we had these scary images in our head of like, oh my God. And then these guys escaped. How did they escape? I mean, it was just this big lore around this island that was just everyone talked about all the time. And this was in the 90s.
Right.
This was in the 1990s. I mean, it wasn't like.
And the thing is, it's not going anywhere. That's the whole thing. It's not like they're going to kind of close Alcatraz and put a casino there, like an Indian casino there. It's like it's always going to be there because it's it's part of the national. Is it national parks or state park? It's national park. National park. So it's never going anywhere unless.
And actually, Ken and I, we've mentioned this before, that we are invited to go do a speaking engagement there. Sell books and so forth, and this coming June. And normally they have the gift shop that's inside the prison, but they're doing renovations of the prison complex, and so we're going to be probably we're going to be moved elsewhere because of all the construction. They said they're spending $60 million to renovate Alcatraz prison. $60 million. Well, we've already talked about that. It's a cash cow because they get 1.5 million visitors every single year to the prison, mostly because of the escape. Because if you walk around the prison, almost all the cells there's nothing in them. They're stripped down, and in some cases they've been damaged. They're just not kept up, except for John and Clarence's cell. It looks like they just left yesterday. That they dress it up. They have they have pictures of them. They have information that's next to the cell on some stands. They don't even do that for Al Capone's prison cell. Or Robert Stroud, the Birdman. You can't even visit that one. That's off limits because he was housed separately and you can't go there. It was in the hospital area. It's on the second floor of the prison.
And you got to be a real Alcatraz aficionado these days to figure out, to know about the Birdman of Alcatraz.
Yeah.
I mean, it's the escape, it's Al Capone, and then the Birdman of Alcatraz. It's pretty much in that order.
Yeah, but, and it was shocking the first time I ever went to Alcatraz. It was even before 2012. I think it was like 2008. And I just took a boat. I took a ride over there, on the ferry. I didn't let them know I was coming. All I wanted to do was walk. I didn't even know it was that popular at that time. And I was just amazed at how many people were standing in front of John and Clarence and Frank Morris's cells. I mean, that was where the majority of the people were. And even today, if you go out there today, everybody will walk around and look, but everyone goes by the escapees' cells. I mean, it's very popular. And why in the world? I got into an argument one time. Maybe a debate with one of the. I'm
saying probably an argument.
Park rangers one time because he was talking about the escape and how they didn't make it. And I said, well, that's not actually true. And I don't know why. I always thought they wanted to keep the narrative that they drowned because that was what sold the place. But really and truly, it would probably sell it even more if they knew that they escaped, because it was the escape itself is what people have come to see, not going out into the bay to say, oh, show me the bay where they drowned at. They came to see the cells where the escape occurred. So what is the harm in saying, yes, they did make it. No, but they still keep that narrative today that they did not make it.
I think
even though we show a photograph of them in Brazil in the 1970s that has yet to be disputed in any way whatsoever, law enforcement tries to discredit that photograph because it goes against the narrative that they've pushed all these years.
Yeah.
Well, you're making, cracks into that veneer with the fact that your book is being sold there now.
Yeah.
They can't deny that.
We didn't think it was going to happen. We thought our chances were very poor, but they agreed.
I thought it would have been a cold day in hell when they sold our book.
Right.
and they invited us to speak there in June. They said,
That's
we want you to come
awesome.
out
Yeah, why
and-
not? Why not?
That's fantastic. I love that.
I mean, it
We'll
just
have to go.
I mean, how many people have? I mean, I think more people have gone to Alcatraz than they have the grassy knoll in Dallas. You know,
Oh, most definitely.
you
Yeah.
know, which is
Like I said, I mean, there's just this lore around it. I mean, every time we went, there's lines to get in, and everybody was just like fascinated by this
Yeah, you
place.
can't, you
I mean-
can't show up on the day of like, hey, we're in San Francisco,
No.
let's go to Alcatraz. You show up there like, no, it's sold out. You
Completely
got to
sold
get
out.
tickets online in a month in advance.
Yeah. Yeah. You can't
Yeah.
just show up. Yeah.
And the crazy thing too is this is not a U.S. thing. I mean, oh my gosh, I've been interviewed by people in Paris just a few weeks ago, and everybody over there
Who interviewed
knows.
you in Paris?
I have to look him up. It was a reporter out of in Paris, and he interviewed me, and I did it over a Zoom call. But I've talked to people in Australia and France and Russia. I've had people that has contacted me throughout the whole world, and they know this story. Even when Mike and I were in Brazil with Josh Gates, we never came upon anyone. In fact, we were in a market doing a shoot, the last piece, and some guy came up to me, I think Mike too, and said, "What are y'all doing?" And we said, told him who was Josh Gates, and he didn't really kind of know who Josh was. And then I said, I think Mike said it's a story about Alcatraz. Oh, Alcatraz! Like they knew Alcatraz. Everybody knows about it.
Oh, yeah.
It is
right.
not something that is just isolated to the U.S.
No, I mean, our analytics for this podcast, I mean, it's all over the place. It's all
It's
over
in like
the world.
80 countries.
Right.
I mean, we got listeners all over the place. So it's
Well, and on our website, we have your analytics page of who's logging in or who's clicking the site, and of course, most of the people are from the United States. But number two, and it's almost the same as the U.S., is Australia.
yeah.
Australia is a very, very strong second, and then it just kind of goes down from there. It's like Australia. Now, of course, it was a penal colony, and there's some sort of common
Definitely
ideas
relationship
about
there.
going against the government and so forth. But it's strong there. The Australians love the Alcatraz story.
Yeah. Well, we do too. And we're keep on going on this. And we got some stuff coming up, which hopefully we'll be able to reveal to you soon.
Very exciting
That
stuff.
could blow this out of the water. We're going to
Well,
be taking, well, I'm just telling, we're going to be taking a trip somewhere in the next few weeks.
Spilling the tea.
I'm not
before
spilling the tea. I'm just teasing. Just letting everybody know there's stuff happening.
Hold it up there.
There's always stuff happening with this story. And we're working with some other people too. So hopefully we'll be able to share that information with you. And then, but that's where we are in this story. It keeps on evolving. And what's interesting today, what's happening is Kash Patel is being, I guess they're voting on his confirmation, who, if he gets confirmed, he'll be the new director of the FBI. And sounds like based upon what everybody was saying, he's going to turn over the apple cart there. And I know, Ken, you've sent some FOIA requests. I mean, hopefully we can kind of reach out. Like I said, we have friends who know people in the administration. Hopefully we can get them to give us some more information, because at this point, what's the harm?
Well, the past administration, the Biden administration, I reached out to the president himself, wrote him a letter, to the attorney general, to the FBI, the head of the FBI at that time, and never heard anything from anybody. They never responded, never wrote back, never, and all I was asking for is just more information. Can I have this? Can we have our items back? Would you be willing to at least talk to me? And never have ever been able to get anyone to respond. So I'm hoping that this new administration, that Trump will respond. I plan on writing Kash Patel, after he's officially in, and we'll see. Maybe we'll get a better response from this group of people.
Maybe.
Fantastic.
All right, guys.
All right. So till next week.
See you next week.